Hello, and thank you for choosing to watch this particular video that I'm creating about the Titanic. The Titanic has been a source of major interest for me over the years. I've always been fascinated about the story of this ocean liner, the unsinkable ship that went out on her first maiden voyage in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and allegedly hit an iceberg and sank. I truly believe that there's a lot more to this story, and from watching many archive videos, old footage of the Titanic and her sister ships, and looking at hundreds, possibly thousands of photographs, I've put a collection together that I'd like to share with you that I believe shows that the Titanic was switched, and the reason that she was switched is because of the financial gain of sinking the Olympic, which had been in several incidents, accidents and collisions over her years. But unfortunately, because of those accidents and collisions, she became uninsurable. And as such, she was going to bring the White Star Line down and make them bankrupt, basically. So cast your mind back to the early 1900s, where there was no mobile phones. They'd never even been thought of. Wireless was just new. Individuals couldn't take photographs. Film footage was very grainy until certainly the late 1920s. And we have a scenario where, as a business person, that business person being faced with their business going under could either put together a plan to switch two very similar vessels and ensure that one sank where they would believe would never be found again, due to there being a lack of technology at that time. But of course, technology's moved on. We can analyse the information, we can look at images, we can look at the film footage, we can look at dates, timestamps, etc. And looking at all of this over many, many years, I've decided to now put this forward as my theory for how the ships were sank, or the Olympic was sunk, and how the Titanic was the surviving sister ship, and indeed even how the switch occurred and at what time interval. And I'm using a massive collection of individual websites and the footage on those websites, photographs and other videos that have been created by individuals. And all I ask you to do is to watch this from start to finish. If you try and skip through this, you're going to miss bits of information that I believe is very pertinent to my case, as it were. And you'll notice at the top I'm leaving all of the web pages available, so you'll be able to see where I'm getting the images from. Some of them, I admit, look a little bit complex. However, you'll soon be able to search for these individual pictures and photographs. So here we are. This is the first image I've decided to choose because I think it really represents one of the major fundamental factors for the fact that the Titanic was the surviving ship and she was rebranded the Olympic. The reason for that is that I've always thought the only way we're ever going to debunk the theory or the conspiracy, the alternative story, is to have a look at when the ships were built and launched, what did they look like? And when the ships ended their life, what did they look like? Now, unfortunately, we're not able to look at the Titanic when she ended her life because she's at the bottom of the Atlantic. We have footage to go on and we will cover that in a short while. However, this is the most important element for me. And it all surrounds this particular area of the ship. These portholes, this porthole configuration, this 2 + 1 + 2 + 1 before she tails off to the deck, this is an area of massive interest. This particular image is taken when the so-called Olympic was in her dazzle paint, when she was commissioned into the Royal Navy. You can see there was a gun also fitted to the bow section. And this crane lift at the front is also an important part of my investigation and following her through her life's journey. However, it is this section here. So a 2 + 1 + 2 + 1 configuration. Please bear that in mind. It's very, very important. So let's have a look at some other images and let's sort of look at the life of the Titanic and where she came from and ultimately where she ended up. This is another picture of the dazzle paint. This is towards the end of the life of, again, what is known as the Olympic, as it says here, the Olympic. However, If you even look at this picture, you can see the dazzle paints coming off. It is the end of the ship's working life. But just look at that far side there. Can you see that configuration just here? Again, the 2 + 1 + 2 configuration. So we can confirm that, you know, this is the same ship. There's a 2 + 1 + 2 configuration, and it tails off quite closely there as a 2 + 1 + 2 configuration. So let's have a look at when the Olympic was launched. So this is the alleged Olympic being launched. A little bit of a bit fuzzy, this picture, but notice something straight away, that at the end here we don't have the same porthole configuration. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 portholes, but not the configuration of 2 + 1 + 2. Now immediately I'm aware that there are some individuals who have said that the Olympic underwent refurbishment works, which meant that this particular area of the ship was changed. I can find no official documentation to support that. So my theory still stands that this is truly the Olympic launched in a pale colour with a dark waterline, and this is her configuration. This is the configuration of the ship as and when she sank, but rebranded Titanic. Now, again, this is a picture of her being launched, allegedly. I will use the word allegedly quite a bit through this video because I wasn't there, the same as you weren't there. You know, none of us were there. We can only look at footage from different angles on the same day and come up with our final solution. But here's some debris. I would imagine she's just slid down the slipway, and there are some anchor ropes, and there are some guys across the front. Now let's just brighten this up a little bit to this image that somebody has enhanced. Again, same photograph, but slightly out of focus, but enhanced. Clearly, it's still a white ship of sorts. This has been enhanced, and it is very, very bright. Clearly, see that the configuration is there of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 portholes in the same section that I'm referring to, the 2 + 1 + 2 configuration. But let's look at this, because this is now saying that this is the Titanic being launched, and we can clearly see there is a disparity between what is claimed to be the Titanic and what is claimed to be the Olympic. So if this is the Titanic, why has she got the same porthole configuration as the Olympic, when we know from records that although they were sister ships, they were very similar, the porthole configuration on the Titanic was different to that of the Olympic. So if this is the Olympic, and I truly believe it is because that's the right porthole configuration, why is this particular ship being called the Titanic? It just doesn't stack up at this point. I'm not going to talk as well through this video about all the sections down here. Individuals talk about open cabins and open decks, etc. I'm only interested in, for now, this particular section here, and also a very important section that I'll come onto towards the end. So let's have another closer look. In the dockyard, again, porthole configuration. Can't quite see what's going on at the back end here, but we're told that this is the Titanic being built. Again, the Titanic, because she's dark here and she lies here. The interesting point on this is these portholes here as well. 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5. 4 to 5 is quite a big jump there between the gaps. 1 to 2 is okay, but 1, 2, 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5 again. Just watch out for that one as we go through this particular video. Can't quite see the back end here. I would be so happy to find a photograph online just showing us just behind here, because I truly believe that this is the 2 + 1 + 2 configuration hiding behind here that we're unable to see. But it's called the Titanic here. However, there's nothing on here which indicates that it is the Titanic, and similarly there are no signs here of the Titanic, which we'll come on to shortly. I truly believe that this is the Olympic that's being built, and the Olympic would show the configuration that I'm talking about. This configuration here would match up with this configuration here, and it is the Olympic and not the Titanic. Now, let's have a look at what an individual's put out as the 100th anniversary of the launch of the Titanic. I'd like to show you what I believe is the Titanic. If we just pause it there, that Titanic. Again, I've left the YouTube URL here. You go and watch the whole length, but take note of the timeline that I'm pausing this on, because I truly believe that's the Titanic, and there is the Titanic's 2+1+2+1 iconic porthole configuration. Let's just jump back for that again. Titanic, we come along 2+1+2 configuration, and that's as much as that particular video that I wanted to share. So again, the 2+1+2+1 configuration is the configuration of the Titanic. Let's look at this one. Again, slightly different angle. Very slightly different angle. But we have two gentlemen here, somebody in the middle. That sort of matches up. In fact, looking at it again, it could be the same footage, but it looks to be slightly in slightly better condition. So again, we have Titanic here, and we have a 2+1+2 configuration. I'm just going to pull this back a little bit just so you can see the front of the ship. There's no sound, but I just wanted to share this element with you. Again, people panning down the whole side of this ship. Unless this whole ship has been CGI'd, then we have this 2+1+2+1 configuration in early film footage. Obviously not after the Titanic was switched with the Olympic, because the Olympic's at the bottom of the ocean. This is, in my view, the Titanic because of that particular porthole configuration. Here's another film footage. Again, two people, one person in the foreground. Let's just have a look at what the individual who has uploaded this is sharing with us. They're showing us the bow, but what they want to show us is this section here again. Titanic, Titanic. When you expand these videos, as you know, put it into full screen, you will see that very, very clearly. Again, there is the YouTube URL to go to. Titanic with the 2+1+2 configuration. Straight the way down the side of the ship. And here we go, Titanic. Same footage, the individual has zoomed in. Confirm yourself for yourselves with these individuals that are on top of the deck. It's the same footage, that's the same lamp. This individual's actually highlighted the word Titanic, and as the film continues, you will see that, in fact I'll just pull this back for you, Titanic here. If we jump back to that particular footage where Titanic is painted in, Titanic, follow that footage. Look at this lamppost, it's the same footage. It's the same 2+1+2 configuration. Again, a final screenshot here on this particular site. Two people, one in the foreground. Titanic, 2+1+2 configuration. It's the same configuration that is shown on all the footage from different angles. Now, this is allegedly the Titanic leaving Belfast before travelling to Southampton on April the 2nd, 1912. Bearing in mind that the alleged Titanic sank on the 14th of April. So allegedly 12 days as she's starting out her journey. This is, again, interesting footage to go and discover. If you have a look, these captions have been added by another individual, but if you have a look at the ship as we start to swing around the side, you'll notice again that there is the word Titanic, and there's the 2+1+2 configuration, because there's the lamppost and it's the same individuals. So this particular video has been taken with a longer shot from the bow and again looking down the side. It's the same ship that we're looking at all of the time. However, when we look at other archive footage and other photographs, we are led to believe that this is the Titanic with her full name painted in situ in the dock as she's being built. And this is where some of the previous photographs, I truly believe, have been tampered with over time. Who knows by who or for what reason, but clearly we can see here that if this is the Titanic, there is this configuration here, the configuration of the 4 portholes in a straight line. Bear that in mind again as we work our way through these images and films. Here's another picture, this taken from or being presented with thanks from the Getty Images archive of allegedly the 2 ships side by side. This one here on the right, the Olympic. We all know the Olympic was completed before the Titanic, so we can probably say this is fairly accurate. However, wouldn't it be great to see if this is the Olympic? Bear in mind she's here, painted white. Can't quite see what colour the Titanic will finally be, but certainly this Olympic here is a pale colour. It'd be great if we could just see a little bit further down the side here of the configuration of when she was launched. Even here, we can't quite make out what porthole configuration, but what we can show, if you remember from my earlier picture, is this configuration of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. The 4 and 5 here, which is the rather large gap, and I would say that the configuration at the end is that of what we're told is the Titanic's configuration, because of course they would have swapped the name Olympic for Titanic, and this ship here would have been the Titanic, and the Titanic would have sank. But of course this is the ship here which eventually was rebranded, so this would show the 2+1+2 configuration across the back. Here's some footage of her again. This is somebody saying that it's the launch of RMS Titanic. Again, look at this. The Titanic allegedly is launched in a dark colour. A dark colour with the straight 4 porthole configuration at the back. You know, why is this? Why are we now being, or why are these images and why are people misrepresenting? Why can we not see the name? You know, there's another question. If the Olympic here is being launched as a pale colour, and if this is the Titanic and she's dark, then this is being shown as a Titanic here as a dark colour. So okay, well maybe it is the Titanic then. You know, maybe the Titanic was launched as in a dark colour. They only launched her once. They only launched the RMS Olympic once. So okay, let's suppose it is the Titanic, and she's launched here in pale colours with 4 portholes. Let's go with that. Let's swing my theory round and see where it goes. And here we are again, the launch of the RMS Titanic. There's a rope here. There's some ropes coming off, possibly to a tug. There's the debris from the dry dock. There's some sort of fire that they've put on top. You know, does that match up? Well, yes, it looks like it's a different camera angle, but there are some ropes here hanging down. There are some workers on the deck. There's the jib there. That seems to match up with the jib here. Some smoke rising here. So yes, that could be the smoke here. Again, it's a dark colour. That's a dark colour. So I would imagine that we have here 2 individuals. Bearing in mind, as I say, look at the debris fields. Things can be changed up here. People can Photoshop, you know, individual items, and they can look at certain things. It's not possible to remove all of the debris. You know, just by simply taking multiple individual shots, photographs and film footage. There are individuals here, you know, in the boat. There are individuals here on the deck. Again, go and have a look at these clips in your own time. Go and view them and come up with your own theories, thoughts and suggestions. But I clearly believe that this is a ship that is being launched, which is the original Olympic, and has been doctored to eventually be rebranded the Titanic, which sinks. So these 4 portholes go to the bottom of the Atlantic, and the Titanic, when she's launched with the 2+1+2 porthole configuration, is indeed the ship that survived, but was rebranded the Olympic. So there's the porthole configuration again. Allegedly the same ship being launched, different angles, dark and then light. So, you know, we're told it's the Titanic, it must be the Titanic. But this is interesting because this is the Titanic Museum in Belfast, and I've got a number of similar clips I'd like to share here. I'm just going to play this on. This shows the launch. This is inside the Titanic Museum, showing you, in their eyes, the launch of the Titanic. That's why they're showing it. There's a number of things I'd like to share here, and hopefully you spotted them, and certainly one of them straight away. If this is the Titanic being launched, why, first of all, can we not see the name either side? Secondly, look at the configuration of the men at the top here. Look at the configuration that there's no jib here. And ultimately, if I pause her about there, we'll move on to the next video. This is again shown as the launch of the Titanic by the title here, but is inside the Titanic Museum as the launch of the Titanic. This is a shot where the individual has still left the TV screen showing. Again, it's the same footage. We can see it's sliding down the slipway here. My apologies, the same crew configuration here at the top. Gentleman there, gentleman here, gentleman here. No jib. There's no jib. Do you remember back here? We were told that this is the Titanic, and there was a jib, and you know, where's the jib gone? Oh, I do apologise. Why's the ship changed colours? It's come down the slip road. That's interesting, isn't it? So that's another angle. Oh, this one's called the launch. Oh no, this one is saying it's the launch of the RMS Olympic. So let's just have a look what this individual found at the launch of the Olympic. Ah. The interesting part is this individual is showing that the Olympic is being launched as a pale coloured ship with a dark base. But maybe it's different footage. Okay, we'll wait. So, oh look, there's lots of workers here. This should be quite interesting. We should be able to show all the workers rushing in, because it's very hard to CGI all these out from old footage. And there she goes. She's going sliding down here. And RMS Olympic, is it? Okay, so RMS Olympic. I'll just forward that on us. There we are. Stop it there. Forward. So there we are. RMS Olympic, allegedly, with no jib. 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals. I think that looks pretty similar to this inside the Titanic Museum. And from that first footage, again, the launch of the Titanic, the same. So now what we're being told by the museum is that the lighter coloured ship is supposedly the Titanic, whereas over here the darker coloured ship is supposed to be the Olympic, although people are calling it the Titanic. It gets a little bit confusing, but clearly you can see that there's a jib here, and that's a dark coloured vessel, whereas here there is no jib and it's a light coloured vessel. So individuals have manipulated the launch of two ships and have tried to confuse us when we start looking at colour patterns and ultimately how they were switched a bit later on. We can only go up to the point of when the Titanic sank in April, the 14th of April 1912. So it's between her launch date, and she was launched, remember, on the 31st of May 1911, and she sank on the 14th of April 1912, so just over 12 months from launch to sinking. Something happened between those dates, and we know very well what happened for that particular period. But look, again, if we're being told that this is the Olympic launch, the next photograph, we're now being told here that the Olympic is actually the white ship, and lo and behold, at launch, there's a bit of debris there. I'd say this is definitely a launch, and there's 1, 2, ignore the shadows, there's one on this side of the ship here, there's 1, 2, 3 ropes, there's one coming down, seems to be disappearing inside one of the portholes. Plenty of debris here, but again, there's a jib here at the top, the name Olympic, but look at the porthole configuration. Again, look, there's a gentleman at the front and 3 gentlemen here, and there's some sort of jib there. So in which case, if that's a pale ship, and that's the pale ship, and that's the Olympic launched, where's the jib? How come the Olympic here is showing the porthole configuration here? Look at the gap again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 to 5, this big gap. which is showing as the Olympic. And I truly believe that this is the Olympic. I think the film footage here in some way has been manipulated, that there is no jib showing. Because if there was a jib showing, individuals could argue, well, this is the jib here, and for some reason the colour's changed. Again, I've never seen a ship change colour going down a slipway. However, the Olympic, which was ultimately rebranded the Titanic, was the one that's at the bottom of the ocean with this configuration of portholes. And this particular ship name was then transposed, of course, onto the other ship, which had the 2+1+2 configuration, and ultimately is the one that went through a whole service, originally built as the Olympic but rebranded Titanic. Here's another interesting photograph. This one here of a ship that's having some repair works, and we have a clear 2+1+2 configuration at the back. There's the final porthole there, so 2+1+2. However, look at how that's been very untidily added as the name of a ship, Titanic. If this was the Titanic, the original Titanic, then ultimately they're now agreeing that she had a 2+1+2 configuration. However, the Olympic has the rear 4 porthole configuration. Again, keep focusing on this configuration, how the names seem to change, and whether or not you truly believe that that is the correct signage. You can zoom into this. You can track this image down and zoom in, and please, I know that you'll just make up your own mind about that. Now, this dry dock work, did the Titanic ever go into dry dock? Well, she did, because she had some propeller works. We'll come on to that later on. Did the Olympic ever have a reason to go into the dry dock? So at this point, if this was indeed the Olympic, was she in dry dock for any specific reason? Well, let's have a look. Now, we know about this. We know that the Olympic had hit the Hawke in September 1911. Well, we know that this damage to the Hawke was considerable. We also know that the hole in the Olympic, the damage below the waterline being much greater than that above, because she flooded in several compartments and she was indeed hit at the rear. So let's have a look at this particular footage here, which I've taken. It's an interesting footage. If I start just here, I'm not going to play it all the way through for you, but you'll see that the videographer, the filmmaker, has put it together as a pan. It goes all the way down the side. Look at the little square here. Look, all the way down the side of the ship and all the way down. And it's perfect. It's absolute perfect footage when you play it all the way through. You go around the bow of the ship until you get to about here, where first of all we're trying to see the name. You can't see the name of the ship even when you watch it in full screen. And when you come around here, it all starts to go very jumpy. You'll notice that, see how it jumps around there? And it goes blank at one point. The film, for some bizarre reason, as it comes round, just at the point where we could see the configuration of the portholes, just above where the timestamp is a 4:04. Of course, if I jump off here, it'll disappear. But just where that configuration would just show us these portholes here, and should clearly show us the name, because as you can see, the main footage is pretty clear. You can't see that. It jumps around and then disappears, and then all of a sudden we're on the harbour. Why is this? Why is this footage here when someone's taken the time to film all the way up this side of the ship and come around the bow, just as we get to that important part? What's her name and what's the porthole configuration? If she's departing, if this is the Olympic departing 1928, why has this footage gone the way it's gone? Why is it being tampered with? Why has it changed? Well, very simply because in 1928, this ship had already been swapped. Because, as we know, on the 14th of April 1912, some 16 years earlier, the Titanic sank. So have a look at that video. So the next one to have a look at is the fact that the Hawke collided on 20th September 1911. And when she collided with the Hawke, again, we can see the film footage here. That matches up very similar to what I've shown you. But this is the part below the waterline. This is the part I wanted to share with you to show the extent of the damage. There's two guys here. This isn't above the waterline. They're not on a deck here. This is below the waterline. This is the dark part. This is below the waterline. This is how she became flooded. This is the part where the Olympic was struck and had so much damage caused to her that it buckled the keel, buckled one of the propeller shafts. It caused, in reality, millions of pounds worth of damage. And of course, White Star Line did not have the funds to make the repairs. They had to botch it up. However, let's look at this now. That in 1934, and look how clear the footage is in this technology in 1934. Clearly see the name Olympic. She's been repainted here. 1934. So just remember that. 1934, how clearly you could see the name Olympic. Now let's jump to this photograph. It's known as unsinkable, and you'll see lots of references about tugboats, you know, pulling and shoving the Titanic. Well, of course, the Titanic never made it to New York. So if this is a picture of the Titanic, these docks have got to be within UK waters, whether it be Belfast, whether it be Southampton. You know, it's somewhere within the waters of the United Kingdom. And by looking closely at this particular photograph, we can clearly see down here a 2+1+2 configuration of whatever this ship is named. So if the Titanic, before she sank, was still the Titanic, which means this image would have been taken prior to the 14th of April 1912, then the Titanic already had a 2+1+2 porthole configuration. Let's just zoom in on that. Let's just show you that's the same photograph. There's the tugboat here, there's a gentleman sat here, there's the smoke. So let's just jump back into there. There's the tugboat, there's a gentleman. We can clearly see now the name Titanic and a 2+1+2 configuration. So one of two things has happened here. This is a photograph, a genuine photograph of the Titanic with her 2+1+2 configuration prior to her sinking, which means that any other ship with the exact configuration here could only have survived if the names were switched. If that Titanic name was switched for Olympic, then the Olympic at some point in her history, and more importantly toward the end of her life, would be showing a 2+1+2 porthole configuration. There are some other images here. It's all the same picture. However, this one is the one I would like you to track down and take your time over looking at. Here's another image. Now again, look at the configuration. Look at this. She looks a little bit tired here. It's bizarre, but bearing in mind that from construction to sinking, she was just over 12 months. But look at the 2+1+2 configuration. And again, go and zoom in on the name that's on here and have a look at what it says. Because it does say Titanic, and it's a 2+1+2 configuration. Again, we can zoom in. Titanic. Titanic, a 2+1+2 configuration. At some point, clearly, before the switch, before she was rebranded Olympic, and Olympic picked up this configuration for the rest of her life. Oh, well, this is interesting, because now we have the Olympic. Although this video is called The Scrapping of the Olympic, there was a little bit of footage before. She wasn't in that bad a condition when she was scrapped, because as we know, she was scrapped when she was in her dazzle colours, just after being decommissioned. So here's the Olympic, and look what we have here. A 2+1+2 porthole configuration in exactly the same place as the 2+1+2 configuration. Again, and this is the Titanic, remember this? I've had individuals who have said, however, these changes were made as some part of this section here being altered, the design being altered. And you think, okay, let's go with that then. So let's have a look at the front portholes, because clearly someone's missed something somewhere. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5. Do you remember that from earlier? 4 to 5 is a big jump. 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5, and then the 2, 1, 2 configuration. Let's have a look here then if this is the Olympic. 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5. 4 to 5. This, which is being promoted as being the Olympic, is clearly the Titanic rebranded Olympic. So that's the part of looking at the porthole configuration. This is even more interesting because one of the things I thought about is if the two ships are swapped and they're side by side, or how do they physically get swapped? It's okay swapping lifeboats across, or putting in names and painting over the top and putting other names over the top, or swapping bits and pieces of artwork or whatever, because internally they were pretty much the same. However, what couldn't be changed very quickly is what happens underneath the water. So I looked at and read lots of articles and lots of documents about what or where could the ships have been if they were to be swapped, and how could we truly show that there is something amiss. And of course, this particular website here and the contents contained in this paragraph here, to me, were just fundamental in showing again that there was some sort of swap that took place, and there was certainly an ability to switch the ships somewhere between January and February 1912, where the Olympic and the Titanic were in close proximity and their propeller blades were changed. And this is key. This document here, which you'll also be able to track down for its provenance, you will see that ship number 400 is the Olympic and ship number 401 is the Titanic. You'll see here that at some point the Olympic propeller was changed from a 3-blade to a 4-blade, whereas the Titanic, this should be allegedly the ship that sank, only ever had 3 blades on its propeller. So if indeed the Olympic was swapped with the Titanic, and this was January, February 1912, bearing in mind that the alleged Titanic sank in April of 1912, if the 4-bladed propeller had been fitted to the Olympic, and it's the Olympic that's actually at the bottom of the Atlantic, then by showing a 4-bladed propeller would show us that it is indeed the Olympic at the bottom of the Atlantic. And if the propellers on the ship that was finally scrapped was a 3-bladed, unless between 1912 and when the Olympic was finally decommissioned in the 11th of October 1935, there would be an update as to whether or not these propellers had been changed. So we now have a case of two ships being in close proximity and having their propeller blades changed, one having a 4-blade and one having a 3-blade. And this is the important part, this is the central propeller, not the two outboards on port and starboard. The two outboard propellers on both ships were 3-bladed propellers. It's the centre propeller that we now need to focus on. If we can look at the centre propeller on the sunken wreck, if it's a 4-blade, then it can only be the Olympic that lies at the bottom of the Atlantic. Well, this is interesting because now we have a photograph allegedly inside of the Titanic's dock, showing the dock and pump house, and this is shown as a 4-bladed ship. And if this is the 4-bladed ship, that's the 4-bladed propeller of the Olympic, again going from this book, it's the only one that had 4 blades fitted, then this must be the Olympic, and this must be the workers inside the dock looking at the Olympic's propellers having been changed to 4 blades. There's another image here, again showing a 4-bladed propeller. So indeed, one of the ships went on to receive 4 blades, and it must be the same one. but it's very difficult to tell from these particular angles. However, look at this title here now on this page. This is saying that this is the Titanic in dry dock. And they're trying to put scale. So again, don't just take my word for it. Go and investigate these photographs and go and have a look. If the official documentation says that the only ship between Olympic and Titanic to have a four-bladed propeller is indeed this one here, this ship here is either not either ship, it's just a random photograph, or it is indeed a picture of the Olympic with her crew here having her four-bladed propeller fitted. Here's some other images to show a ship with some propeller works being done here. These are the three blades, and one of the blades is missing from here. The interesting point to note is this dark area here and the scale that now runs up the side. Again, gentlemen here, enhanced photograph. Can you notice the 23, 24, 25, the watermark levels? Zoom in again, 23, 24, 25. Same image. This here is an image of the four-bladed propeller. Again, the four-bladed propeller that's here, that's the four blades there. This is not an angle of three blades. There is the fourth blade is on just hidden behind this one, but this is the fourth blade. And if we have a look, there's the propeller repair works here, and there is that four-bladed propeller again. There are the watermarks again, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, etc. So this ship here now has four blades, and we've already been told that there was only one ship that was launched with four blades, or that was not launched but had the four-bladed propeller fitted, and that was the Olympic. So again, this is being called the Titanic. This is not the Titanic. This is the Olympic, which is now being rebranded. This is the blade that was meant for the Olympic, which shows clearly again inside their documentation, four-bladed propeller on ship 400. However, the blade that was fitted to a rebranded Olympic, which became the Titanic. Now, maybe there is somebody else out there in the world who is far better positioned, far better suited, far better versed, people that know other people, who have higher level conversations with individuals, who may like to try and share with us this very important point that in fact the Olympic's four-bladed propeller was fitted onto the Titanic, the original Titanic, and indeed the original Titanic became the Olympic, and so the one that sank was the Olympic. The one that sank, this one here with four blades, is in fact the Olympic that's been rebranded as the Titanic. And if we could show footage of a four-bladed propeller, or if we could show film footage from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean with four blades, then again, based on this evidence, it can only be the Titanic. Remembering that the Titanic, the Olympic and the Titanic were switched, and therefore the 401 Olympic became the Titanic with four blades. So remember that part now. So let's just have a look if there's anybody else. Perhaps James Cameron, the director of this epic movie, knows something that we don't, because there's no reason to put into the film what he puts in. And let's play this through and you'll see exactly what I mean. It must have been horrendous, people fighting on board the ship, innocent people scrambling for their life as the ship sinks, with water pressure building up, and in it comes. It must have been absolutely terrifying. No way of communicating with your family, not enough lifeboats. It must have been absolutely, truly horrendous. The water rushing through the decks, rushing across through the corridors, bursting through the cabins, drowning people, and here we go. The stern of the ship lifts out of the water, and what do we have? We have a 1, 2, 3 bladed propeller, 1, 2, 3 bladed propeller, but we're now focusing on a 1, 2, 3, 4 bladed propeller. Maybe we should ask the question, why did the director decide to choose a four-bladed propeller when up until a certain point in history both ships were only ever fitted with a three-bladed propeller? Why allegedly now we're saying that Ship 401 is the one with a 4-bladed propeller. But let's just move that on. Again, 4-bladed propeller rising out of the water. And we might think that that's it. There's people jumping overboard. Man falls into water. What should we focus on? We focus on 1, 2, 3, a 4-bladed propeller. All the time to that particular scene. Not over here, the actors here, not the gentleman who's fallen in the water. We're focusing on a 4-bladed propeller. Clearly, to me, a message that it was a 4-bladed ship that sank to the bottom of the Atlantic. And in this notebook, written by the engineers of Harland and Wolff, the only ship to have 4 blades was ship 400, which was indeed the Olympic. And that takes me back full circle to the original of look for the 2+1+2 configuration. This again is allegedly the Olympic having finished her service in her dazzle paint with a 2+1+2 configuration. And it is my conjecture that this is a rebranded Titanic who always had and was always launched with the 2+1+2 configuration, and with the final piece that she was also swapped, and the 4-propellered ship that sank when it was swapped between January and February of 1912 was in fact the Olympic. And it was the Olympic because of her damage, because of the reinsurance that had been taken out just a few days before she sailed. The investigative work I've completed, which is that she wasn't seaworthy. This is the Olympic, was not seaworthy because of the damage she'd received. And so in that very short space of time of the Olympic being out of commission, the Titanic being finished, made ready, launched, was then swapped under the guise that they were both having propellers looked at, and the 4-bladed propeller was indeed added to the now struggling Olympic, and it was the Olympic which was in reality scuttled, and not necessarily through an iceberg. There are many stories about the fact there was a fire on board in one of the coal bunkers for many days which weakened the hull. Perhaps the freezing waters of the Atlantic loosened the rivets popped. She was going allegedly at high speed, and so, you know, the steel peeled back and the ironworks peeled back and the water rushed in, and ultimately she sank. You know, why wasn't the fire put out before she left dock? We'll never know these answers. But the reason for my investigations is very simple. It's not about my story here and sharing it with you and my thoughts that the ship at the end of her life indeed is the Titanic. My thoughts go out to the fact that if it's true, if for business purposes to save a company, and bearing in mind the White Star Line also merged with Cunard at the end of the war, they were able to decommission a lot of ships, and they were funded then by the British government. If it is true that way back in 1912, for the sake of saving a company, a very wealthy businessman was able to take out his competition, remove himself from travelling on the ship himself, along with his family and closest friends, make millions of dollars on the insurance payout, and ultimately not have to worry about servicing what was in reality a ship which was not seaworthy, then it is all about the 1,503 passengers who lost their lives. And if it was a deliberate act, and if there was financial irregularities going on, then indeed these 1,503 individuals didn't lose their life in a terrible accident. They were murdered. And they were murdered by the people controlling what was going on with the switching of these ships. The 4 propellers, the 2+1+2 configuration. There are certain areas that the individuals could not have foreseen way back in 1912 that we would be able to see today by putting all of the photographs together, all of the footage, the war footage with the dazzle paint, and again, it's a tragedy even to consider that 1,503 people were murdered. And this video is to those individuals who ultimately will remain in my thoughts forever, under the true belief that they were murdered because of a financial gain in swapping the Olympic and the Titanic. And my heart goes out to those individuals and their families and for all the lives they never lived. And I thank you very much for watching this video.